somewhere in the quarter, a restaurant, hotel lobby, just get somewhere inside because those winds could be picking up at any moment across the French Quarter as that line of storms does blow on in. I want to go back to our wind speeds here across the metro and see exactly what they're doing. We've had those reports there. You can see 41 Kenner, 54 at MSY. We're gusting to 45 at the airport lakefront. We are not seeing any of our sites update just yet. These are not current. These are probably as of the last 20 minutes or so. But yeah, gusting to 45 now at the lakefront. And so intense line of storms blowing on in here. Let's go back to our French Quarter tower cam if we can. Control room, we continue to watch this line here. And we'll be watching these trees to see what they do, to see when the winds really start to pick up. But you can see there that dark cloud, not raining in the quarter yet, but it's about to at any moment as this line of storms moves into the area. The severe thunderstorm warning on the North Shore, this includes St. Tammany, Hancock County going into Pearl River County. That goes until 1:45 as well, and it includes areas like Slidell Bay, St. Louis. That storm also has the potential to produce the 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So you will probably start to see some, at least sporadic power outages in these areas that are seeing these strong wind gusts. The storms are moving. They're moving at about 45 miles an hour, at least the speed of them. And so we're keeping an eye. But you can see the wind starting to pick up in the French Quarter right now as our camera begins to shake. The rain is starting to move in as well. Unfortunately, we don't have our weather site on top of the station anymore, so I'm not going to be able to get a reading of what the winds are doing here in the French Quarter, but the winds are picking up. Let's hang on to this shot right here as we watch the winds pick up here in the quarter. And as that line of storms blows in, I'm going to turn it this direction so we get a better idea of what the winds look like here. Yeah, and you can tell the winds are blowing. So if you are watching us and you are in the French Quarter and hopefully you're not outside anymore, hopefully you're able to get inside and get into a lobby of a hotel, maybe a bar, as these winds pick up. The rain will start to fall very heavily. Something else we need to keep an eye on is the flash flooding risk. We do have a flood advisory or a street flood advisory in effect for the city of New Orleans at the moment. And that's just because the rainfall rates with this storm are going to be quite high. So you can see there the winds really howling across the city. You can see some of these trees blowing around. Looks like power is still on the quarter. Fortunately, a lot of our infrastructure is below ground in the quarter, so it's rather difficult for us to lose the power in the quarter, but it can certainly happen. So if you are watching us anywhere in New Orleans, severe thunderstorm warning has been issued for the entire metro as strong storms blow in. They are producing some very strong winds. We've gusted to 54 miles per hour at Kenner. We gusted to 49 miles an hour out at the Lakefront Airport. And just taking a look at some of our latest observations, gusting to 45 at the airport, at the Lakefront Airport, and not having any of our other sites update just yet. We're sustained, oh wow, we just gusted to 59 at the Lakefront Airport with the latest update. So winds out at the lakefront, they are obviously howling, maybe a little bit stronger than what we're seeing in New Orleans itself. You can see the rain really starting to pick up in the city. The winds, I haven't seen anything that's been so dramatic on our tower cam here in the French Quarter, but I don't have an official reading here in the quarter itself. But we've gusted to 54 at Kenner, 59 at the airport, at least at the Lakefront Airport, and 41 at another site out in Kenner as well. So definitely some strong winds blowing through the area. Power outages, I don't know, control room, if we even have if we have a producer back there perhaps. Okay, see if you could pull up that Entergy map at some point, just check in. We'll check in that in just a second. This is fine. We can stick with this for now as we continue to watch that. Well, actually, do go back to Switcher. Pull up radar for me really fast, and because I want to watch radar while you work on that. So a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for the Metro New Orleans. We've also got a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for the Slidell and St. Tammany Parish along with Hancock County. This is strong storms blow through the area. They are producing very strong wind gusts, gusting to about 60 at the lakefront. We are gusting to We're gusting to over 50 at times in Kenner about 10 to 15 minutes ago, and we're seeing very, very heavy rainfall. Now, the tornado threat with all this is low, but it wouldn't be impossible to get some quick spin-up tornadoes along the leading edge of these strong winds and along the leading edge of these storms. So just treat these as, you would a tornado. You don't necessarily need to get into the bathtub here, but you do need to be away from windows as these storms roll in, as winds blowing 50, 60 miles an hour can sometimes throw rocks and debris, and that's oftentimes how we see some windows knocked out. All right, we do have an Entergy looking at it. If we could zoom into the metro, if it's possible, to see if we are reporting any major power outage issues. The good news is we're not seeing widespread. There's some isolated spots. I haven't been keeping an eye on this long enough to know if it's from the weather or not, but at the moment, and this hasn't updated, but we'll keep an eye on this as we go through the next several minutes as these strong winds do blow into areas here along the South Shore and along the North Shore. All right, we can go back to radar here, and you can see that the heavy rain is definitely over much of New Orleans, extending back through Kenner. I want you to notice these strong storms extend back somewhat in a line. So this line is interesting, and here's something else we're keeping an eye on, and that could enhance the floodings right across the metro New Orleans. This line is moving to the east, and there's nothing behind it. But as you get towards the southern edge of this line, there's a tail on it, and that tail flattens out. This is when you get training problems. As this storm pulls away, it's going to pull all this with it. Now, how this evolves, we're going to have to keep a close eye on this, because this tail end could train over parts of the city for the next hour or so. And that would cause flooding problems where we could pick up isolated spots of 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. So we are going to have to keep an eye on the flooding potential, as well as the gusty wind, the hail, and the thunder and lightning potential. But certainly something we want to be keeping an eye on is that tail end there that could lead to the training, and that's how we get our flooding. Remember, it does not take a lot of heavy rain down here to get street flooding. So if you are watching us and you are parked on the curb or next to the curb that fills up with a lot of water, it may not be a bad idea to move the car, because things could evolve over the next hour where we start to see some street flooding across parts of New Orleans. We don't have a flash flood warning at the moment, but that could change. I tell you what, let's take a look at our camera over on the West Bank if possible. These are showing you from about 500 feet up. You got the dark clouds. You can see that rain shaft coming on in here, and off in the distance, this is usually New Orleans. You've got the CBD here and the French Quarter here. So the rain's just now getting to the West Bank with some of those ominous clouds. If we can go to our French Quarter cam here and take a look at what things look at where it is raining, the winds are still blowing. You can see we are getting some sheets of rainfall coming off. The good news, our lights are still on here on the streetcar rail on Rampart, so that tells me that at least the power is still on in this immediate area. So that's some good news. But yes, the winds, they are blowing, and it is raining. Taking a look at some of our winds across the metro, we're still gusting to 59. If we can go back to our weather switcher here, we're still gusting to 59 at the airport, sustained at the Lakefront Airport to 44. That's tropical storm conditions. Winds are starting to come down some. Oh, great. Okay. And we've got a picture coming in from Mandeville Lakefront as the strong storms blew in there. You could see some of those ominous clouds, obviously before the rain started to come in. But even the North Shore, as we've been talking about, has been experiencing the strong winds, and you're under severe thunderstorm warning as well. We've been getting in some great reports from our chat with the National Weather Service. We're getting a report. They had a 42-mile-per-hour wind gust along the Mandeville near the lakefront, or in Mandeville itself. That gusted to 42 miles an hour just moments ago as that storm blew through. If you're just tuning in, we did have some wind gusts. We're still gusting to 59 out at the lakefront in New Orleans. We're gusting to 41 in Kenner, 31 now at the airport out in Kenner. That is coming down. That was up 54 just moments ago. So the winds, initially they're going to blow probably for 5 to 10 minutes, and then they'll start to drop off some, but the rain is not going to drop off all that much. So that's the main concern with this line of storms blowing in at the moment, are the strong winds, and then we're needing to keep an eye on the flooding potential. All right, we got a shot of Bourbon Street. Obviously, folks out there running, trying to get to somewhere dry. It's coming down. You can see the flaps of I'm not sure which location this is, but this is Arno's, from Arno's. But across the street, those flaps blowing there in the wind, and people trying to run and get to somewhere because this rain is not going to be wrapping up anytime soon. You can see umbrellas out there with the ponchos, so we'll be keeping an eye on all of our cameras here. We've got a camera here on top of the station showing what's going on, maybe 50 to 100 feet up or so, and you can see the rain coming down. The winds haven't picked up a lot in the French Quarter compared to what they were. There are gusty, but I haven't seen anything that's just really strikes me as extremely damaging in the French Quarter. Now, along the lakefront, that's where we are likely seeing some damaging wind gust. And if you do have any reports of damage or anything like that, you can always let us know. Here at the station where you're at and what damage you are seeing. Parts of Slidell reported 34-mile-per-hour wind gusts with some power flickers going on up there in Slidell. This is a different thunderstorm. If we can go back to our weather switcher here, this storm is now getting right over Slidell. So Slidell, you're about to get in the thick of it. Same thing for Pearl River, the community, and then up into Pearl River County, getting into Picayune. You may miss the worst of this storm, but just to your south, boy, it's coming down, and this is heading into Hancock County. So if you're in Bay St. Louis, Diamond Head, the Kill, down through Stennis, this storm is heading your way, and it'll be making its way there over the next 30 minutes or so. I can get a timeline for you on this so you do have an idea of when this is going to be blowing into your area. We'll move this at about 50 miles an hour. They're moving at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. So we'll give you a little bit of a look ahead here. We could see getting towards the Pearlington area, Logtown, around 1:30 or so. So in the next 10 minutes or so, getting into parts of Hancock County. It'll get into the Bay St. Louis area as we get into the 1:45. So you still have 30 minutes or so before it gets into, or at least 25 minutes or so before it gets into Bay St. Louis and Waveland. Getting closer to the Kill by 1:38, Diamond Head 1:43, and then off into Harrison County after that, closer to the 2 o'clock hour. So that's our severe thunderstorm that's up in Slidell. Here on the South Shore, we are socked in the rain at this point, and this is one of our concerns, is this training effect. This rain moving over the same areas causing areas of street flooding. You could see we had a gust to, I believe that says 28 miles an hour at our Gentilly site. There's the 59-mile-per-hour wind gust at the Lakefront Airport, and our other sites still have not updated. We are still sustained at 35 at the airport, at the lakefront. So it probably, if you're near or along the lakefront, living out there, it probably sounds like a full-blown tropical storm at this point. So if you're just joining us, it's 1:23 here. Reason we're covering this is because we've got hundreds of thousands of people in New Orleans, up in Ponchatoula for our festivals, and we got some rough weather coming through. We've had multiple wind gusts between 50 to nearly 60 miles an hour as this storm has been blowing into the city. And that can certainly lead to power outages. That can lead to damage and knock down trees as well. You can see this intense line of storms. It's cleared out of Tangipahoa Parish. So if you're watching us at Strawberry Fest, you've got the worst bastion. The rest of the afternoon should be fairly okay, at least for the next 3 to 4 hours. Here in the city, we've got a little bit of ways to go here before we clear all this out. And for some of you, it's really just beginning. You can see all those intense reds, lightning and thunder all the way from Kenner, stretching through New Orleans, in through New Orleans East, out through Chalmette and St. Bernard. And the West Bank's getting on the edge of this, but this is trying to get into the West Bank at this point. And you could also see some strong wind gusts. That severe thunderstorm warning has been trimmed back some. It no longer includes Kenner or Metairie, but it is still coming down. The worst of the winds are just past you, but we are still getting some strong winds blowing through parts of Metro New Orleans. And we are getting some power outage reports. Okay, thanks. We are getting more than 5,000 outages reported in St. John Parish. They did see some strong wind gusts from this same storm out in St. John. I know out in Laplace they measured a 40-plus mile-per-hour wind gust about 30 minutes ago. We are also getting some reports of power outages up in parts of Slidell, it looks like. All right. Yeah, and over 1,000 outages reported in Tangipahoa. I'm getting some outage reports in Slidell, although I don't have an exact number up there in St. Tammany. And rain is coming down pretty hard for those locations. And yeah, getting some power outages rolling in here across parts of the metro. In Jefferson Parish, you said over 1,000, I believe, is what I just heard in my ear. So the heavy rain's coming down. The winds are still blowing. If we can go back to our tower cam, the French Quarter one would be great to see what things look like in the French Quarter. Rain's still coming down. It is still breezy. If we could take a look at our West Bank tower cam looking out through the city, well, that's what's going on. This is 500 feet up, and I can tell you, those winds are blowing. You can see the rain probably coming in curtains at our camera here, so it is starting to come down very heavy there on the West Bank, and I can hear the rain coming down here on the studio roof as well, and every now and then I can hear some doors blowing around out there. So the winds are blowing and the rain is coming down. Let's go back to our weather switcher here. As we look at our rainfall rates, these are some very high rainfall rates. Now, these are what we call instantaneous rainfall rates, meaning if you were to sample how heavy the rain is at that exact moment, it's producing 2 to 4 to 4 to 6 inches an hour. Those are rainfall rates that are going to start to cause problems across parts of the metro, and you could see a lot of these rainfall rates anywhere between 2 to upwards of 3 inches an hour are possible. These deeper purples, you're starting to get into that 4 inch an hour criteria. And keep in mind, when it's raining 2 to 4 inches an hour, that's 1 to 2 inches in 15 minutes, possibly. So that's going to no doubt lead to some localized street flooding, and we still don't have a flash flood warning, but that could certainly change at any moment. So it is 1:27 here, just a reset. We are tracking a couple of severe thunderstorms. Let me zoom out here to show you what's going on across the entire area. We've got a severe thunderstorm in St. Tammany Parish heading into Hancock County now. So if you're watching us in Hammond, if you're watching us in Ponchatoula, the Strawberry Fest going on, the worst is past you. The next several hours are going to be fine. If you're in St. Tammany, the worst is about to get past you. If you're in Mandeville, the worst is done. Slidell, you're still in the thick of it. And this is heading into Hancock County, getting to Bay St. Louis within the next 15 minutes or so. These are moving at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. Down here on the South Shore, we are all still in the thick of it, whether you're in the east, in New Orleans, in the Quarter, or Metairie, Kenner, into St. Charles, St. John Parish, all the way down into Lafourche Parish. We've got some of those strong storms. So we've still got a ways to go before this clears on out of the city. So we're keeping an eye. I'm just watching our reports here, getting some wind gust reports out of Slidell. Still gusting to about 27 in Slidell. So I think the worst of the winds are done with you in Slidell, but these are now heading into parts of Hancock County. That's the North Shore storm. The South Shore storm, we're also still under that severe thunderstorm warning. I think the worst of the winds are probably past the French Quarter, but it's not pretty out there. We are still seeing very heavy rainfall and an occasional wind gust, but those winds of 50 to nearly 60 miles an hour are now getting into parts of St. Bernard Parish, heading into probably New Orleans east. Our sites out here, they're still not updating all that much. The museum has a wind gust reported at 7. That seems a little low, though. 46 still gusting at the airport out at the lakefront. We gusted to 59 earlier, and MSY is down to a 29 mile per hour wind gust. So the winds are going to start to come down now, especially from west to east. Now, the rainfall is not going to come down all that quickly. So that's still going to be with us maybe for a little while longer. Let's check in on our rain totals to see if these have updated, because I'm curious on how quickly this rain's coming down out at MSY. Of course, MSY is not reporting. Hammond picked up about ½ an inch of rainfall as those storms came down, but MSY is not reporting rain at this moment, although it is coming down. So we do have a street flood advisory for the area. That's going to go for several more hours. We could see that upgraded to a flash flood warning. That would not be surprising if the National Weather Service went ahead and did that. Let's go back to our French Quarter camera if we can. Control room, you can see rain still coming down. I'm going to step off screen so I can get a closer look. Power still on Rampart, you can see, but we have had multiple power outages reported across the area. Some places reporting over 5,000 up in St. John Parish. We have quite a few power outages. We have some reported in Jefferson Parish, Tangipahoa Parish, and parts of St. Tammany as well. And obviously all this is due to our thunderstorms, whether it was from the gusty winds, could have been from lightning as well. The wind's still blowing. You could see it rolling off some of these, reading a report, I'm sorry, seeing some of that rain rolling off the roofs there in the French Quarter. The winds are not going to stop blowing anytime soon, but you can see a closer look at things, that the rain is coming down in sheets across The French Quarter here, certainly not the prettiest weather for French Quarter Fest this afternoon, obviously. And if you are watching us, maybe you're in a hotel lobby at this point or a bar away from the rain, we still have probably another hour of this. This rain is not clearing out as quickly as we would like it to. Now, it may not be as heavy in about 30 minutes, but I think it's still going to be raining out there, so keeping an eye on this. If we could go back to weather switcher here, the National Weather Service says they are watching, they're likely seeing a waterspout develop over the marshy areas, or marsh areas of extreme southeastern St. Tammany Parish. That's going to be right out here. Let's go to velocity on our radar. Oh yeah, and you can see these intense winds being sampled by our radar. Now these are good samples because this is very close to our radar. The winds along this leading edge could be approaching 60 to 70 miles an hour. Stennis, down through Pearlington. The winds are just getting through you in Pearlington. There's Logtown. Big crash of thunder there. That's where the potential water spout's going to be. It's going to be right off Highway 90, and this is going to track just towards the Pearl River Basin area, mainly near or south of Pearlington. Logtown out here, and there are some homes out here. So that's where we could see a water spout developing. In the marshy areas. We'll keep an eye on this circulation, and remember, you can get these quick spin-up circulations anywhere along this leading line of intense storms. I want to show you what our radar is sampling with some of these strong winds. You could see 49 mile per hour wind there with the velocity scan, nearly 60 getting into the Pearlington area, 65 mile per hour winds where that potential water spout excuse me, is developing down there in the extreme marsh areas of St. Tammany Parish. So that's heading into Hancock County. If you're in Bay St. Louis, probably getting to you in the next 15 minutes or so. At least the strongest part of this storm will start to move in the next 15 minutes. We're keeping an eye on some of these reports. Mesonet Station, the Causeway, wow, measured a wind gust of 64 miles per hour as these storms blew through. That was about 30 minutes ago when the storms initially arrived near the Causeway. They are, since the worst at least is past that part of the Causeway, but it just shows you what these storms are capable of that are blowing through St. Tammany and into now St. Bernard Parish is where the worst of it is here in the city. So this leading edge is where we're seeing our strongest winds. Every now and then we are seeing winds gusting 50 to 60 plus miles per hour, especially in our water areas, our overwater, where we have less friction. We are seeing wind gusts over 60 to maybe even 65 miles per hour. So continue to watch this. Just getting reports, more power outages, mainly in Laplace over there in St. John Parish. We're getting approximately 3,000 power outages in that specific area right around Laplace. They do have some trees down around Old Highway 51 in St. John Parish, the low road that's blocking southbound lanes. The parish law enforcement says they're en route to clear those, but that is Old Highway 51 in St. John Parish. The low road got some limbs or a tree down blocking some of that, so we are getting some trees down. There's also some power outages reported in Slidell. No surprise here with any of this, with the strong winds and some of these producing 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. Here in the city of New Orleans, the worst of the wind is past us. Now, it is still breezy out there. It's not pretty, but we are seeing the worst of the winds move out of the area and get into more of the marshy areas out into Lake Bourne. St. Bernard Parish still getting the winds, but you can see it's still gusty. We're still gusting to 20 at Metairie. City Park is gusting to 26 still. We're still gusting over 40 miles an hour at the lakefront. Algiers is gusting to 20 and still gusting to 25 miles an hour down there along the riverside. That's going to be just off Tchoupitoulas, this weather site, and close to the river. So our winds continue to be strong. Let's talk about when does this all wrap up? Well, the North Shore is going to see this wrap up faster than the South Shore, at least in the next 30 minutes or so. Now, if you're in Tangipahoa Parish and Washington Parish and most of St. Tammany, the worst is past you. This is now getting into Hancock County. Here in the city of New Orleans, we probably still have another hour or so of the potential for some heavy rain. In this model, boy, it's not doing a very good job, but it shows that we see the most of the storms push on out through the afternoon. 3, 4 o'clock, we're getting some breaks, at least from anything heavy. And then another round of storms is expected to blow in as we go into tonight. So tonight we'll have another round of probably strong storms, and we'll keep an eye on those as well. And by tonight, we're talking after midnight. Could be 1, 2, 3 a.m. when those storms are blowing on in. We're also getting reports of some power lines down with trees leaning in parts of St. Tammany Parish, I believe. They didn't give a specific location. Yeah, near Lacombe. So we've got some power lines down in the Lacombe area. Remember, if you see a down power line, treat it as a live power line. Don't get near it, don't drive over it, don't try to walk under power lines. You don't know whether they're live or not, and we oftentimes see just tragedies after the storm with power lines down and things. There's the intense line. We need to get this out of here though, and this little tail is going to linger a bit longer, but you notice Covington to Hammond to Amite, mostly in the clear. There's still some rain and lightning and thunder. You don't want to be standing out in it, but the worst is past you, moving into Hancock County now, getting into parts of Bay St. Louis in the next probably 5 minutes or so. Let's go ahead and take our traffic cam here. This is going to be up along the twin spans, and it's frozen at the moment, but we are seeing very heavy rain obviously along the twin spans. Winds are likely gusting out here as well. Could be gusting over 50 miles an hour with that initial line. We had that wind gust to 65 on the causeway. That was about 30 minutes ago as that initial line blew on in. I want to put this in motion here and show you what we're watching. You can see that line of storms. This tail is the problem. St. Tammany, Tangipahoa Parish, you're not going to have a big flooding problem from this because it's moving out. Here in the city, the big question is, how quickly does this tail try to sweep on out? Oftentimes, you get these line of storms with the southern edge kind of getting left behind, and this is when you can get a training effect. Now, the good news is the intensity of the rain that came in initially is higher than what is lingering behind. So it's not raining as hard, but it could still be heavy enough to where we do start to get some reports of street flooding, and we're going to be keeping an eye on that. If you are seeing any reports of street flooding or any damage, please do let us know. And I'm checking in on our street flooding map here across the city. We are seeing reports of just a few spots. Looks like the Carrollton underpass. We all know the Carrollton underpass that passes right there near Costco. The underpass it's at least trigger that it's closed. I'm assuming there's some water standing there. I don't have visuals of that, but streetwise, New Orleans site that reports these things are saying that Carrollton Underpass closed and Gentilly Peoples Underpass is also closed due to standing water. Remember, don't drive through these things. Oftentimes, you can't tell how deep the water actually is, and you get into it, and then, well, you lose your car. So we are getting some reports of some of our underpasses, those typical spots that often fill up very quickly, are at least seeing a lot of water inundation. I tell you what, these winds are kicking up here in extreme southeastern St. Tammany and into Hancock County. This to me looks like the most intense storm at the moment. Where you see those yellows, those are winds that are getting up to 60 to maybe 70 miles an hour. I think most of these are going to be about 50 to 60, but these little pockets embedded in here that are heading right along Highway 90 and I-10 in Mississippi, these are going to be producing wind gusts 50 to 60 miles an hour more than likely, and that's why we've got that severe thunderstorm warning for your area. I want to get a timeline on this, these storms moving into Hancock County. Let me get a good estimate on how fast this storm is moving, because the good news is it is moving fast, so it's not moving very slowly, but about 45 miles an hour. I'm going to track it at about 45 miles an hour as well. And we'll give you a rough estimate on when these strong winds will really start to pick up in your neighborhood over in Hancock County. Now remember, this radar is delayed by about 3 to 4 minutes, so the timing of this, it can give it about 5 minutes plus or minus, but just get ready. Getting into the Shoreline Park, Waveland, Bay St. Louis area by 1:45 to 1:50. So in the next 5 minutes, maybe even just a little bit less than 5 minutes, but roughly, the winds should start to pick up in Bay St. Louis, Waveland, and going into the Shoreline Park area, getting towards Pasch Christian, maybe closer to the 1:55 to 2 o'clock hour, getting into Long Beach by the 2 o'clock hour, as well as this moves into Harrison County. The Kill, it's moving in right now. It's not populating on the map, but here's the junction. There's 603, there's I-10, there's the Kill, heavy, strong winds moving in, and then here's all your strong winds moving through Hancock County, gust upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour. And our radar is, it's not just the radar confirming these. We've had reports on the ground from wind instruments reporting 50 to 60 to even 64 mile per hour winds down there along the causeway. If you are needing to cross the lake, or if you are on the North Shore, the worst of this is now past the causeway. It's past St. Tammany for the most part. It's past Tangipahoa, our friends up at the Strawberry Fest. If they continue the festival today, should be okay for now. We're expecting more storms later tonight, but the rest of the afternoon I think is going to be fairly uneventful up there in Ponchatoula. But here in the city, we're still getting the rain. And it looks like we got another round of some strong storms back towards St. Charles that has some heavy rain too. So you can see that intense storm coming in down here into St. Charles Parish towards Luling and Booty. This storm is producing some strong wind gusts, but nothing that's been significant or reported just yet, but could see some wind gusts to 30 to 40 miles an hour in these storms that aren't measured. All right, and we do have another report. Boy, this is the highest wind gust I've seen so far. This was in Eden Isles, 67 mile per hour wind gusts as these storms blew through. So in St. Tammany Parish, these storms, boy, they're rocking and rolling, producing that 67 mile per hour wind gust. Once again, that was in Eden Isles. This was about, let's look. Yeah, you can see that burst. See the bright colors coming through at about 1:20 to 1:20 p.m. So about 20 minutes ago, that southern edge there produced that 67 mile per hour wind gust. So approaching 70 miles an hour. 70 miles an hour or so for areas around Slidell, and that one was reported in Eden Isle. This is now into Hancock County as well, so hopefully these winds start to come down some as this severe storm blows through the area, and you can see, still seeing some very high wind gusts. We're starting to get some colors we usually don't see on our velocity now getting populated. I want to see what radar thinks and how fast it thinks these winds are moving. 60, 60. All right, so we're still seeing those bright yellows. That's where your strongest winds are. Those once again are coming into Bay St. Louis and Waveland at any moment. So that's where your strongest winds are. Here in the city of New Orleans, we're keeping an eye on things, mainly just rainfall at this point. It's still a little gusty. We've got lightning and thunder, but we are starting to see the heaviest of the rain mainly out in New Orleans east now. This will continue to move to the east as well, and still raining pretty hard in Chalmette, back through Arabi and parts of Algiers. But in the city, we're going to get a bit of a break from the heaviest of the rain, and then keeping an eye on this cell back to the southwest is producing some very heavy rainfall. Excuse me, I'm trying to read reports coming on in. It looks like we are seeing trees down over parts of the interstate in St. Tammany. It does not specify which interstate. I'm not sure if it's 55 or I-12. So, or excuse me, 59 or I-12, but we will need to watch that. Several Slidell fire is getting calls for some trees down on power lines. So yeah, it looks like we've got a lot of trees down and power lines down across parts of the North Shore as this storm blew through St. Tammany, producing 60 to nearly 70 mile per hour wind gusts as well. Just getting an update from Colin Arnold, the emergency management director here in New Orleans. He's saying so far we've picked up about 1.5 to 2 inches of rainfall across the city. The French Quarter Fest has suspended for now until the weather passes. So at the moment, no surprise there, but French Quarter Fest has suspended at the moment, obviously telling people, hopefully they've already been seeking shelter, but we'll wait for this rain to get out of here. And it may still be another hour or so before we really get the heaviest of the rain out of here. Still seeing more reports, trees down on power lines across parts of St. Tammany Parish. Still trying to get an update. We'll try to get an update. Okay, and more reports from tree limbs down in the Clearview area over in Metairie. So we had some strong winds in Metairie as well. As the storms blew through the metro, we had winds gusting at 60 miles an hour at the lakefront. So certainly had strong wind gusts across the city as well. And Clay, I don't know if we can check in on that interstate. They were talking about maybe some trees down somewhere near the interstate. I think it's in St. Tammany Parish. All the cameras are down, so maybe we'll keep an eye on that. But unfortunately, we don't have any good cameras across our interstates like we normally do. I'm not sure if that is thanks to the wind knocking out something, but this was the last image we had at about 1:43. So moments ago, you could see traffic out there, but the worst of the rain has moved out of St. Tammany. We're just getting reports of the aftermath. We're seeing the trees down, power lines, of course, power outages as well. But the worst of it is past you in the entire North Shore, really, at this point, given the all clear for the severe weather. But it's getting rough in Hancock County. If you're watching us in Bay St. Louis, Diamond Head to Kill, winds are blowing. There is a potential that we could see 70-mile-per-hour winds. So treat this as a storm where, you know, during a tornado, you go inside, you get away from windows. Do the same thing in this with winds blowing 70 miles an hour. If you are in a car, you don't want to be parked under a tree. You don't want to be parked under power lines. Just be thinking of those types of things. And with the heavy rainfall, don't be driving through flooded streets as well. So here in New Orleans, we are keeping an eye on things. The French Quarter Fest has been suspended temporarily until this clears out. We still have a little while longer just because we're getting this kind of tail feature on this line of storms, and we've got this storm coming in. So if you're watching us in Kenner, if you're watching us in St. Charles Parish, Luling, Booty, Destrehan, St. Rose, you got a pretty good storm coming in at the moment. That's going to produce some very heavy rain, lots of lightning and thunder. Okay, and this was the camera we were just talking about. This is 190 and 12. Unfortunately, our cameras are not, there we go, finally moving, and you can see traffic's moving. It's hard to tell if power is, at least the street lights are the, my Lord, what are these called? The cameras, street lights, that's what they're called. I don't know, I'm blanking on what we call these things, but we do have lights on there in the distance. It's hard to tell if any of the lights are on over here in the businesses, but we are getting some of those reports across St. Tammany of power being out. Down here on the South Shore, we have gotten some power outages as well reported across the area. Still working to see how many exactly we have across the metro, but we do have thousands without power between the North Shore and South Shore. Let's go back to radar here if we can, our weather switcher, and I want to talk about the storm blowing into Bay St. Louis and going into now Harrison County. This is where our strongest storms are with our strongest winds. We are seeing gusts upwards of 60 to 70 miles an hour just now getting into Bay St. Louis. Waveland and Shoreline Park, so that's where the worst of this is at the moment. And I don't know if we can get radar pulled back up, perhaps. Thank you. You can see the most intense line of the storms is really now moving into Mississippi and into our coastal areas. Now, we do have some strong storms down here through the bayou parishes. None of this has been severe, but it is producing some brief heavy rainfall as it slides to the east here, and lightning and thunder. It may produce some wind gusts 30 to 40 miles an hour, but the worst of it has been just to our north, extending all the way from the North Shore down across the lake, down now into east of New Orleans. So the worst of this is now past New Orleans, although we are not done with the rainfall just yet. Just still getting many reports. Every time you hear a ding, that's a report reporting trees down along parts of roads in parts of St. Tammany Parish. We are getting trees down in the Bayou Liberty Road area. Okay, and just getting more reports in. National Weather Service saying winds could gust. Yeah, that's 70 miles an hour or so, especially in Hancock County. So if you are in Hancock County, we need to be taking shelter from this storm. Treat it as you would like a tornado warning, meaning you would go inside to an interior place away from windows, because oftentimes what happens, this thing can throw gravel if winds are blowing 70 miles an hour, and that can knock out windows. And of course, you don't want to be standing near a window as that happens. So our severe thunderstorm warning is going to continue for parts of Hancock County. Going into Harrison County, that's where our strongest storms are, and that's where we're seeing the worst of it at the moment. Now here in New Orleans, and you can see there, French Quarter Fest temporarily suspended thanks to these strong storms that have blown in. Now we're not done with the rain. We've got to get this tail feature I've been talking about. Here's the main line. It's moving. It's cleared out of the North Shore. The North Shore is doing good, but down here in New Orleans, we've got this tail feature that's getting dragged along with it, and this can prolong the rainfall longer than with the initial line moves through. So this is still going to be with New Orleans for probably another 30 minutes to an hour at least, as long as we don't see more development across back to the west. I'm trying to read these reports coming on in. So our reports so far, we pop them up where we've seen our strongest wind reported. We reported a 64-mile-per-hour wind gust over the causeway. We reported a 67-mile-per-hour wind gust in Eden Isle as the storms blew through. You can see these icons showing where we've got limbs and power lines down. We had a strong wind gust in Mandeville. We had some strong wind gusts reported in the city over 50 to even near 60 miles an hour. So those are where we've seen our strongest wind gusts so far as this intense line of storms has blown on through. Still just getting multiple reports of power lines down, power outages, trees down in some spots across a large portion of the area. So this is what we're dealing with this afternoon. French Quarter Fest temporarily suspended until this all clears out. I'm thinking that we start to see improvements in the next hour or so in the city of New Orleans, but for now we've got rain, although it's not as intense. It's still raining and there's some thunder and lightning, so it's not the best idea to be out in it. And then we've got this tail line right here back in St. Charles that is probably going to sweep over the metro as well. If you're watching us on the North Shore, notice the heaviest of the rain has now moved out. And while there is still some sprinkles and light rain at times, the worst of it is past you. If we can pull back up our French Quarter cam to see what things look like here in the quarter, big improvements from what we were dealing with just moments ago. Excuse me, about 30 minutes ago. You can at least see the CBD there, so the rainfall rates have come down in the city of New Orleans. We've picked up about 2 inches of rainfall so far, and those typical spots where we usually see street flooding, that's where we're seeing the street flooding. If we can go to our Bourbon cam, maybe, if we can get that pulled up to see what Bourbon Street's looking like. Okay, that's fine. To see what Bourbon Street is looking like, we've got the French Quarter Fest going on and a lot of people taking shelter. People are starting to come back out. We've got umbrellas, but there's still storms coming in from behind this, so not in the clear just yet. While it's calming down at the moment, we still have some rain and maybe some heavy rain coming in the next 15 to 20 minutes or so across the city. And if we can go back to radar, if possible, you could see that intense area of storms now right along the river. West Wego, Wagaman is where we're seeing the heaviest of it with this round. This is going to slide to the east here. This will move into the French Quarter in the next probably 5 to 10 minutes, really. It's got a quick movement to it. So the heavy rain will pick back up in the French Quarter in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but look behind it. We do see some improvements. So we see the heaviest of the rain move in, and then we'll get some breaks. Now, we are looking at a mostly dry middle of the afternoon. There is a chance for a few additional storms to pop up this evening, but we have another round of storms that's going to come in late tonight. And by late tonight, we're talking after midnight. So you may hear some storms rolling in later tonight if you are in bed. Or if you head to bed and while you're asleep, you may hear some strong storm. Not a bad idea tonight to have the weather radio on or have your cell phone alerts on, just in case a tornado warning is issued while you're asleep tonight. We do have a low risk for a tornado or two. The risk is low, but it's there and enough to maybe you do want to have your weather radio on or your cell phone alerts on. That obnoxious sound your cell phones make, but it can save your life if a tornado is coming in while you're asleep. Still getting just more power lines down. A lot of power lines down across St. Tammany Parish. I'm curious if we can get an estimate on how many power outages are being reported in St. Tammany at this moment, because I just keep getting multiple reports of the power lines down from various locations all across St. Tammany, especially near and around I-12. Not so much northern St. Tammany, but down closer to Slidell and down towards Lacombe and Eden Isles. It seems like that's where the highest winds were as they blew through St. Tammany Parish. So we'll work to get all those numbers for you on how many people are without power at this hour, but we are seeing quite a bit reported across the southeast Louisiana. We saw those winds really pick up about 30 minutes ago in most spots. Once again, the worst of this is now starting to move out of the Channel 4 viewing area, and while we still have storms, we're not done with the rain and storms. I think we're done with the worst winds in Louisiana. Now, the winds are still howling out here in Bay St. Louis, now getting into Long Beach, past Christian, and getting into Gulfport, and up along Highway 49 in Harrison County, but these are continuing to ease. Okay, and we're reporting just under 4,500 power outages in JP, mostly in Terrytown. Yeah, you can see right there the power, big area of power outages in Terrytown. That's where our transmitter is actually, and if we can pull up that West Bank Tower cam, possible control room. Okay, and you can see this is what it looks like around Terrytown. The heaviest of the rain is starting to come down, but we are seeing, this is where we're seeing quite a few of those power outages. Zooming down in, you can see across the area. Of course, if it was dark, we would be able to see if the lights were on or off, but this is where we're getting quite a few power outages on the West Bank in Terrytown. So that's where a lot of our JP power outages are being reported. excuse me, you can see that the heaviest of the rain, it's not raining terribly hard anymore in the city. It's still raining, but we have that other batch coming in at any moment. So the rain is expected to pick back up, especially for areas along the West Bank, uptown, and into the French Quarter as this next batch of storms moves in. This one shouldn't last terribly long, but it is enough to where if you are just kind of sheltering, if you're at French Quarter Fest and you're sheltering, you still could probably shelter for another 20 or 30 minutes or so before things really start to improve. As this next storm blows in. Let's go back to radar if we can, and we'll get a timeline on when this perhaps clears out. Not necessarily when it starts, but maybe when we start to see the worst get on out of here. I'm going to track the back end of this, and you can see things starting to improve in Kenner in the next, we'll get it pulled up here in just a second, radar. You can see getting into Kenner starting to improve in the next probably 5 to 10 minutes. New Orleans starting to improve in the next 15 to 20 minutes is when we will likely see the back end of this storm get past the city. Here in Tarrytown or the West Bank, 220, things improving. After 2:30, things will start to improve over there in St. Bernard Parish. So in the next 30 minutes or so, a lot of this is going to be moving past the metro. It looks, that's the way it looks right now, and hopefully we can get things going again at French Quarter Fest. If you have been up in Ponchatoula for Strawberry Fest, the great news is you're in the clear at this point. We're not expecting anything to come in anytime soon. The heaviest has moved on out, and I bet people have already been getting back out there because it's been cleared for about an hour now in Ponchatoula. And no additional development, at least for the next several hours. Now, later this evening, there could be a few showers and storms pop up, but that next round of storms will most likely move in as we get into tonight. So after midnight is when we'll be watching those storms. So if you're just joining us, let me reset here before we get you back to regular programming. We've been tracking these strong storms. It is just before 2 p.m. and the worst of the storms are into Mississippi now. We've got strong winds moving into Harrison County, but it is still storming like crazy in Hancock County. I think just the worst of the winds are past you. Here in New Orleans, we've still got some storms coming through, but in the next 30 minutes or so, I think the rain will start to clear on out in New Orleans, at least the heavy rain, and then we can hopefully get back to French Quarter Fest kicking off and having a good afternoon here as you're down towards the Bayou parishes, Houma, down through Lafourche Parish, towards Raceland, cut off LaRose, still getting some good storms. These are sliding to the east as well, and we should start to see some improvements back for Thibodaux and Houma happening at any moment. So this line of storms is going to be drifting to the east. As long as this continues to move to the east and doesn't try to creep to the north, I think we'll start to see some improvements in the city in the next 30 minutes. At the moment, we haven't had significant flooding problems across the city, just those typical spots. And there are several roads that do have street flooding. There's no doubt about it. It doesn't take much to get that, but we're not looking at a catastrophic flooding event for the city. Very, very normal street flooding is, I guess, what you could call it, but those typical spots are being reported. Gentilly People's Underpass is still being reported as closed. The good news is the Carrollton Underpass near Costco looks like it has probably drained. It's not being reported as closed anymore, so that's some good news. And then there's just many various streets. Parts of Royal Street seeing some street flooding. We've got some street flooding out in Gentilly, some street flooding in the Bywater Marigny. We've got some street flooding reported up in Mid-City. We've got street flooding reported up in the Gentilly area, as I mentioned, and various other locations. We've got some street flooding reported in Algiers. So just in spots is where we're seeing it. So nothing out of the norm there. You can see each blue dot is going to be a reported street that has some flooding. It doesn't necessarily tell you how bad it is, but these are the spots. And this is a fairly normal looking map when we get a heavy rain of a quick couple of inches, which we did pick up about 2 inches very quickly across the city of New Orleans. Just looking at more reports across, coming in from viewers and coming in from officials on what is exactly going on. So at this moment, let's end it with radar here. Severe storms moving into Mississippi. We still have storms coming through the city of New Orleans. The rain is going to start to pick back up in New Orleans, in the French Quarter, in the next probably couple of minutes or so. I just hear some thunder rolling. This will move in, and then by 2:20 to 2:30, I think this batch is going to clear through. And we still have some storms to the south, but they're moving more east. So as long as we can continue to move to the east, we'll get some drier weather moving in later this afternoon. And then our second round of storms is going to move in by tonight. We're going to continue to get updates on how many power outages we have. We have a lot of power lines and trees down reported, especially up in St. Tammany Parish. It seems like that's where the strongest winds have been reported so far, upwards of about 70 miles an hour. We do have power outages reported across the metro, back through the river parishes, as well as those winds blew in. They did knock out some power, knock down some trees too. So we're gathering all that information for you, and we will have a lot more information for you coming up here at 5 o'clock for the Eyewitness News. But for now, we're going to throw you back to regular programming. We'll continue to track everything. We'll cut back in if anything severe pops back up. But for now, thanks for joining me.
From WWL-TV's Eyewitness News, this has been your local weather expert alert, sponsored by